Welcome to Live from Plato's Cave. I am Mario Veen. If you are anything like me, you've been watching a lot of films and series lately. Today we're going to look at Live from Plato's Cave through the lens of film. If you have been listening to Plato's story in the first episode, perhaps you already made some connections between film and the cave. The first is that if you look at the situation of the prisoners in the cave, it's like they sit in a kind of cinema. I mean, they are in their seats watching a screen, and the fire behind them and the objects carried in front of it kind of act like a film projector. Except, of course, that they don't realize that they are watching a movie. Plato says that they are just like us. So, how is our life like a film? When one of the prisoners stands up and turns around, he is blinded by the fire. Have you ever stood up in the cinema and turned around and you're blinded by the projector light? And what happens when you walk out of that cinema? Do you just walk out into the daylight like Jim Carrey in the movie The Truman Show? Or do you end up in another dimension like Inception? And that is the second connection. There are so many films that are using this theme. Besides The Truman Show and Inception, there's The Matrix, Waking Life, The Maze Runner, the recent Marvel series WandaVision, Blade Runner, Total Recall, the original with Arnold Schwarzenegger and the shitty remake, Naked Lunch, the Divergent series, Interstellar, Ready Player One, Jupiter Ascending. Well, I could go on, but you get the point, right? I bet you can think of some more as well. So why is it that we're so occupied with illusion and reality in the collective consciousness? And the third connection is that we can learn from films. I don't just mean educational documentaries or biopics, but films can make you reflect on your own life, show situations that you're in from another perspective and give you new ideas. Film can even ask questions. Film is kind of like a magical thing that allows us to experience visions and emotions from our comfortable seat in Plato's cave. Well, I cannot think of anyone better to speak about this topic than our guide today, Masha Bronnikova. Masha and I have been friends for a long time, and she is the one that opened my eyes to look at film in a different way. Masha is a poet, a performer, a cultural producer and a connector. She initiates and joins interdisciplinary projects around the Netherlands, and currently she works with platforms such as OT301 Studios, DNK, Stingerbol and the Bookstore Foundation. Masha was born in Siberia. She grew up in the Netherlands, and she lived in various other places in Europe, North America and South America. So that's 4 continents so far. Masha, if I describe your life like this, it kind of sounds like a film. Do you ever look at your life like this?
I would say taking a distance definitely makes me feel that it's a film, but only when looking back. When you're right in the midst of it, are you a director or are you watching the film? Yeah, so I'd say life looks like film when you're looking back at it. I've only had a few moments that were very intense, kind of traumatic. And then I thought, oh, right now I feel like I'm in a horror film or a thriller. Or, when I was traveling, I would encounter moments and I would definitely feel, I'm creating a comedy. But I can't imagine a person walking around all the time thinking they are in a film. Just, this realization, I would say, at least in my case, comes when I look back on things.
Yeah.
And looking back, things fall into place and certain events and this happened and that happened. And in that process, it pans out as a film or as something we, consider, what is film? Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm looking at it from a certain perspective, from a certain distance.
Yeah, this situation that we're in right now in the pandemic. I mean, so many films have been made about viruses and I wonder how it will be if we look back at this in 10 years. Sometimes, for sure, it feels like science fiction because we're doing everything on Zoom. And I mean, right now, we're not even in the same place and we're speaking to each other. It's kind of incredible, I think. When you said you see it as a film, when you look back, it kind of reminded me of what Sartre wrote in Nausea, that you have to choose to live your life or to recount it. By the way, if you recognize Masha's voice, that could very well be because she read Plato's Allegory in the first episode. How was that, reading that story?
Yeah, it's been a while. So I was actually grateful that you asked me to do that. It's been a while since I've read Plato.
You read some stories as well on your SoundCloud. I really liked it, especially because I think you read those books for the first time because sometimes you're laughing or you're surprised, right?
Well, yeah, that's something I started doing in the beginning of the first lockdown, and to keep myself busy, I just started recording whatever I was reading at that moment.
It's really great to listen to it. I mean, it's nice to be read to, I think.
Yeah, it's relaxing. But so yeah, the virus, the lockdown thing, what you were just mentioning. For example, today I watched a part of a documentary about a festival. So from 2010, I believe. And I'm watching, so now it's the other way, that thing in the past of people dancing together. We're talking about thousands of people. That looks like science fiction.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And at the same time, I'm kind of reminiscing and I'm watching it because, I miss it.
But don't you think it's so strange how, because if I see a festival or something like that, I cringe because I think, wow, those people are so close to each other. But it has just been over a year now. And I hear this from a lot of people. And for me, it's so crazy that something that has affected the world so much, at least, I mean, we don't know how it will affect the world in the long term, but it has affected the world so much. But it happened in just 1 year. I mean, if it was a film, maybe it would be unbelievable.
So, well, yeah, and what you were saying earlier is now we have actually more time to watch films and series, but we can't do that, together in the cinemas how we used to do it. So on one hand, we have much more time and leisurely time, I would say, but we can't. It's not an action. We don't go out. We don't take that. We don't make the step to go see something, meet someone, discuss it afterwards. So it's a completely different process.
Do you think what is the difference between, because now, okay, so most of the cinemas are closed, and the producers are starting to release the films on the streaming services, right? Mm-hmm. Well, they're investing in it now, and it might be bad news for cinemas. Do you think when we go back to normal, whatever that is, do you think people will return to the cinemas? Is that a different experience from just watching? I mean, you can watch in your own home. You don't have to leave the house. It's quite tempting, right?
Well, the same question was posed when television came in, and a lot of people said, that's it. Television is going to take over.
Yeah.
The cinemas are gone forever. It's definitely an art on its own, and it's part of a cultural lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's a way of spending time together. It's a way of getting to know each other, having an experience together. But at the same time, I'm more worried on a longer term. Well, worried. I'm more aware of the fact that, where technology is taking us, that the format of the film, what is a film, might change very soon. And it's becoming more interactive, and we're talking about virtual reality and things like that. So there is a definite transition. But right now it's hard to say because we're busy with so many practical questions, you know.
Yeah. So we've been friends for a long time now. I was thinking today, I think it's 18 years. So I think our relationship is allowed to drink now, at least in the Netherlands. But so what I remember is that you introduced me to one of your favorite films. I think it was Stalker by Andrei Tarkovsky. I'm not 100% sure. But that already tells me a lot because I remember I enjoyed the film, and it was like unlike anything I've ever seen. But what I remember most is how you did that. It was like almost a sacred ritual. So you put the chairs, everything, you made everything ready, so wouldn't have to get up to get drinks or something like that. And I was not allowed to speak. And it was just like the feeling of you really set the stage for something. It was like a special event. I think that's what I learned from you is just even watching a film with intense focus. It doesn't really even matter maybe which films you watch, but with this focus and this kind of attention. So I wonder, where did that come from? What role did film play in your childhood?
Well, yeah, so what you just described, I believe it happened when I was around 20, maybe even younger. And, this is quite a serious film. When I look back to it now, I wonder, oh my gosh, I mean, that kind of relationship to it, I definitely developed with my family, with my parents. And they were the kind of people that started showing Tarkovsky to me at the age of 8. And I honestly have not, I've never really met other people who've had that. So in our house, it was a ritual, and I would say maybe every week since the age of 8, 9. So imagine a child watching these very serious, pretty slow films on a weekly basis. And that definitely does something to you.
Yeah. So for people who don't know Andrei Tarkovsky, so he's a Russian director. His films are, well, back in the day, we called them long, I think, but right now it's just average size film. But they are about, well, I don't even know where to start.
They are quite spiritual. And so now again, looking back as a grown-up, I realize everything has to, it has a context. So for my parents, when they were young in Soviet Union, this was a kind of rebellion. To watch these films, to appreciate these films, to take them seriously, because being spiritual was not part of the culture. And only much later did I realize they were sharing with me their rebellion. But I did not grow up in that Soviet culture. So again, I am very much grateful that they shared it with me. But my own interpretation and how I lived those films, because they were definitely part of my life, was something completely different, because first of all, I was a child. Second of all, I was in a completely other culture. So it's just funny that when I realized that what they were sharing with me was already something different, something completely different, had a different impact on me than what it was for them.
Yeah. So film is like a double-edged sword in that way, right? Because I think a lot of the, maybe let's say, criticism of films nowadays is exactly the reverse. It's like the Plato's cave thing. We live a life and we expect happy endings, dramatic turns. And if you just think about it, how much of your knowledge about society is really just knowledge from films? I mean, most people nowadays, they know what a surgery is like. They know what war is like. They know what it is like to travel around the world or to go into space. But yeah, how much does that shape it? So what I wanted to say is that a lot of the criticism is that we're kind of, we're in Plato's cave because we are fed this Hollywood
We're
story.
being programmed, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But how you describe it is the other way around, right? It reminds me of, well, the last episode with Mika Ball about image thinking and how images can introduce something new in the reality that you're used to.
Yeah. Well, don't forget also the beginning of this art, of this medium. What are we talking about? Beginning 20th century and 19th? And I just, I don't know, a few months ago, I watched a documentary about Alice Guy Blaché. Have you ever heard of her?
No.
So in this documentary, they do a research into how apparently she was the first female filmmaker. And first she was an assistant, I think maybe it was with the Lumieres. And then she started making her own short films. What amazed me was that she was not only, kind of forgotten, but she was, because, most people know those first images, the train, workers coming out of the factory.
Yeah. And
she actually started to film some kind of fairy tale, or something, a story. And this is for me, that was like a pivotal point to kind of go back and realize that when they were just starting to work, to experiment with this equipment, they were really they had no idea what could it be, where could it take them.
You just put your camera somewhere and you film something which you're practically able to do, and which you think, oh, people like to see that.
Yeah, just capturing life as it is. And I've seen this in this film, but also in others, that a lot of, because look, this is a time of inventions back then. There was a lot of competition. So this was just another invention, and actually a lot of people thought that it wouldn't last. Like many of those inventions, some of them did stay. And I think if it was just something to record, a street in Paris, maybe it wouldn't have lasted. But because they did something else with it, they started, they gave it they took it to the next level of that it's actually telling us something. I do believe that that's why it stayed. And got us where it got us. On the other hand, if they took it into some other direction, we don't know. Maybe right now we'd have a completely other visual cultural experience.
Yeah. Mika Ball, in some of her books, she describes this idea she calls preposterous, like something, it's kind of a reversal of time. So I think, if I remember correctly, she speaks about the Flaubert and maybe even Proust writing style. And she says, well, photography had to be invented because of this writing style. So it's kind of a reversal of how we normally think about, okay, first there's a technology, and in this technology we used to explore and make things. But it's like something had to be invented for that. And again, I think back of the way Plato describes the cave, it's just a cinema. And of course, in his days, you didn't even have, electric light or newspapers or something like that. So, and the image, so you started out saying the first images were like a train. And I think most people have seen this people sitting in a cinema and a train comes towards the camera and people run away because they think it's a real train, and we kind of laugh about that. But so then they think they had to learn the suspension of disbelief, I think it's called, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're watching something and you don't think there's a literal train coming towards you, but if you would think, well, it's just a film, it would be just boring. So it's somewhere in between, right? Could you speak a little bit about that?
The suspension?
Yeah.
Well, so somewhere in us, there is an understanding. We've discussed this with you before. It's somewhere in our cultural DNA, the caves, right? So, and then, and now I'm referring to that amazing documentary by Herzog, Cave of Forgotten Dreams, yeah?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, dreams, and I think one of Lumiere's dreamt how to make the camera. So it's all kind of interweaving, right?
Yeah.
So again, creating that image, those images, and watching them go hand in hand, right? And I think he shows that very well in that film. I mean, it's amazing that they could enter those caves and then to see what people were representing, portraying. We can only guess how they experienced what they drew on their walls and how the fire reflected on it, and how to them it was their immediate reality, but at the same time we don't know what those drawings meant to them.
So just a bit of background about that documentary by Werner Herzog. He's a well-known documentary maker, and this documentary is about, I think it was kind of newly discovered cave paintings
in France, yeah.
In France around 35,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's in a cave. So that's a bit different because they're in a cave and there's presumably a fire in the cave at night, and they're watching images on the cave walls. But yeah, so they know they know their images, but there's also something about the shadow play, and he really goes deeply into it.
Well, yeah, because you asked me about the suspense, understanding the image or giving meaning to it.
Yeah.
And I would say that started already back then, that relationship,
mm-hmm.
And sharing that relationship, because creating those images and experiencing them together, they do go together. The other thing is if we say it's somehow ritualistic or like a nourishment, then after the nourishment, you need time for digestion, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so those images that they were creating and then experiencing in the cave were part of their lifestyle as it was, the temporality of their lifestyles. If we take our as to now or pre the virus, how has that ritual morphed, and what is the digestion, time lapse? And I would say that time is very limited. So if it being part of our cultural lifestyles, how much can we, how deep can we go into something, knowing that afterwards I'm going to do that, I'm going to do, and we're just busy with all these other things. So, this, the meaning giving or the traveling through these experiences got narrower and narrower. Mm-hmm. Within a very structured lifestyle.
I'm thinking back about 10 years ago or something. I was single. Actually, I just been ill, so I didn't have a lot of energy. I couldn't work, but I had this movie cinema subscription that I, unlimited, and just right around where I lived, there were 3 cinemas. So I would see 1 or 2 films every day, and it was so amazing, and I loved it so much. And I'm thinking now, one of most movies now are at least 2 hours, and it's 2 hours in your day if you go to the cinema where you just sit and you look at the screen, but you can kind of also let your thoughts wander. It doesn't, most movies are not so hard to follow that you really have to pay attention all the time. So yeah, in a way, it's kind of like dreaming, right? Where, yeah, dreaming is also, I think people say it's also a way of processing the events in your day.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's how it is for me, that I connect when I watch a film. If I watch it one time and I watch it a year later, it's a completely different film, but that has to do with what's going on with me in the moment, in that day, kind of a way of learning about the events in my day. And sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there are some answers. Sometimes the film asks other questions.
Yeah, exactly. So it's also very much dependent on, the different processes in our lives, different cycles, and which questions do we prioritize, what speaks to us at which time.
Yeah.
So
it's just one concrete example, and I think maybe not many people have seen this film or this scene, but I will. Yeah, it's kind of difficult how to share films, right? Because if I'm scared if we put the clips in here, we'll get some copyright stuff. So I'll put some links in the description. So this is a scene from Nostalgia, which is a Tarkovsky film.
mm-hmm.
And I think towards the end, the candle scene. So this man has a candle, he lights a candle, and he walks across an empty swimming pool. It's a swimming pool, right?
In Italy, yeah.
In Italy. And he walks across, and every time the candle extinguishes because of the wind, he has to walk back and light it again until he can walk to the other side of the pool. And I think the scene is 15 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, it's actually been years since I've seen that film. He's performing, his own ritual, and we are granted this kind of privilege to be there with him, to go through that with him, and to experience the temporality of that ritual with him. So that's very generous of the director.
But then you speak about time. I'm just thinking, if you would write a book, you would say he walked across the pool, and it took a few times. Or if you would see it in a Hollywood film, it would be cut, because there are some rules about Hollywood films that every scene has to move the story forward. And, there's a question if there's even a story there, but you're unless you walk out of the cinema, you're kind of forced to spend time with someone where almost nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm thinking about. What does it do to someone to sit there and just watch something happening that, I don't know if it's interesting or not, but you're being kept there. And so when I watched it, I would go through, really, when is he gonna stop? Or would get bored sometimes. Then I would see something interesting. So it was like a roller coaster watching this scene.
Yeah.
Wasn't Tarkovsky for a long time? Wasn't he the one that had the longest shot in film history?
The one shot taken, yeah, I believe so. Maybe in Sacrifice.
Yeah.
In the last film. Well, I'm not sure what your question is. I guess you're talking about why is that necessary, or how does that actually change the direction of cinema?
But yeah, my question is about, it's kind of maybe what I'm doing now is keep focusing on one thing and not much happens, but you take time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
What does that do to the audience or to the experience of watching a film?
Again, we don't know who comes with what,
Yeah.
you know. Like, you know, I started this conversation talking about context. I have to think of this parable, and it's a Sufi tale. Maybe you've heard of it, where the city of blind men hear that there's an elephant in a caravan, and they all want to experience the elephant, but they're all blind. So they all go there and they touch different parts of the elephant. They come back to the city, and everyone has a different story of what the elephant is like.
Yeah, so you're watching the same film, but it's a question of whether it's the same film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, the focusing part is great. Everyone will find something different in that focusing process. You know, the distinction is from a film that is purely directed at entertaining or tantalizing. What's the word? Tintillating your senses, right? Or some kind of a shock therapy.
Yeah.
You know, and then constant shocking. But again, even that is different parts of the elephant, right? I mean, who are we to say that a thriller is so much worse than a philosophical poetic film? Is it worse? Is it, what's going on here, right?
Well, yeah. It's. I mean, if you contrast, maybe there's no bigger contrast. If you think about the candle scene, and then you think about Quentin Tarantino, which I love. He's one of my favorite directors. I think for you as you like him too, right?
Yeah, sure.
But his films are very violent in a way. But I once heard him speak about how he conducts films or directs. Well, actually, I say conduct because he speaks about it. He says, well, he realized that the audience is his orchestra and he's the director. So he directs like, okay, this is where I want a surprise. Here I want a laugh. Here I want them to, you know, they want to look away from the screen because it's so violent, but they have to keep watching. So there it's all, he controls the emotions of the audience.
Yeah, like a DJ.
Like a DJ, exactly. And you build towards something, and especially in the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's actually a commentary on Hollywood, right? And he builds towards something, and every time you think, okay, there's going to be a showdown, but there's no showdown until the very end. It's such a different approach to, they're both brilliant directors, but it's such a different approach to cinema.
Yeah, for sure. And like, again, it's just a matter of preference and taste. Sometimes certain fugues fall out for a while. And I say fugues because, like classical music, right? It has its moments. It's always there. It's classic. What does that mean? Right? The classics. Yeah. But it also kind of, it has its own waves of presence, you know, and sometimes something blows new life into it. But I'm not sure. I don't know if it will actually keep on being that for, you know, a very long time. So it's these waves, these frequencies of something, a way of, be it music or film, a certain perception, you know, they linger for quite a while. The new generations can twist them around and learn from them, or completely disregard them. So it's hard to say which one will make like the biggest impact at some point. And it can be very, something very unexpected.
And it's amazing that now we have so much to choose from. We have the entire history of film. Well, that's not entirely true. Some films are more accessible than others, of course. And but still, if you want to, you can watch films from the 40s, or films that have just been released, or anywhere in between.
Yeah, it's a bit of an avalanche, and this is a problem in so many disciplines, right? Yeah. Because we're kind of overwhelmed, and the filters, I would say, are not very strong at this moment for people.
Yeah.
Because the overwhelming is not only in the cultural, but it's also on other levels of kind of social cohesion that is quite chaotic and distorted.
Yeah.
So where to look? And it's interesting if people make more conscious choices, and I'm thinking now because also, again, as a child, I also watched other kinds of films which were pure Soviet propaganda,
Yeah.
And I knew that it was that already as a child. I knew it because it was so obvious. But still, I liked it, they were fun and people were happy in those films and everybody was kind of happily working, for the system.
Yeah.
So, of course, and as a child, even though knowing that, I still like to watch them because they were fun.
Yeah, and I think we have the same thing going on now. Well, not the same thing, but something similar with, it's like you're watching a film, but you're being sold something.
And it's something to hold on to, especially when everything else is such a mess and chaos, and life is not that simple. It's really easy to hold on to very kind of easily packaged messages.
Mm-hmm. And many of the same message, because I wanted to ask you about the relationship between film and story. First of all, do you think every film has to have a story?
How can a film not be a story? Like, what is your because I always compare it to some piece of music.
Yeah.
And we, even in like that piece of John Cage that is silent, it has its limits and we fill it in ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I mean, there is movement in there.
Yeah.
There is some kind of our own interpretation, whatever it is. So even if you show me, I don't know, just a tree for 5 minutes and it's a short film, I will make it into a story. But the thing is, like I told you that one of my latest favorite films is The Violent Heart.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very tragic film, also very beautifully filmed. Like at this point in my life, I would say, I prefer a film with this kind of twist and a story that kind of gets under your skin and you think about it for like at least a day.
Mm-hmm.
Like right now, for me personally, I prefer something like that.
Yeah.
And something that kind of grabs your social imagination, I don't know, your ideas about society, your ideas about human relationships. And, maybe a few years later, this will change for me and I'll have another preference.
Yeah, one of those films for me is Waking Life by Richard Linklater.
Yeah.
It's one of those films that it's a bit like, I don't know, some kind of food or something. You feel like, I just have to have pizza today, or I have to have this today. But pizza I eat every week. But there's some other ones like Indian food or something. I have it like maybe every few months. And like, I have to see that. So we spoke about Stalker earlier, and actually I was wondering, should I rewatch it in preparation for this conversation. But I had it even ready, but I couldn't do it. And that's one of those films. Maybe I watch Stalker every 5 years or something, but it's like I have to prepare for it. And after I've watched it, I can't watch other films for a while. And yeah, it kind of keeps seeping through. And Waking Life is like that. And also it's like, it's very explicitly Plato's cave, right? It's like you don't really know, are they dreaming or not? Is he dreaming or not? And is there a story in that film? They're just having conversations. And
that's interesting.
Yeah. And
I mean, it's interesting because, sorry, did I interrupt you? What did you want to say?
No, go ahead.
No, it's just because both are kind of they're essentially science fiction, and they take place somewhere in our imagination.
Mm-hmm.
They're not necessarily here or there. You know, sometimes it's easier, of course, to say it's the future or something like this.
Yeah.
Or it's a dream. But in fact, the more you go into it, you don't need to give it a place. And that's a very kind of important opposite of the rest of the stuff we get to see.
Yeah.
That is very determined and explains things to us.
Yeah, and in Waking Life, they also speak about film in the film, which is, you know, one thing that you see in film a lot, that it's self-referential, right? And there's one part where they speak about Bazin. I don't know this person, but apparently wrote about film and about a holy moment, and that actually every moment is holy, and film can show us that. And I think that's one of the scenes in that film that made such an impression on me.
Mm-hmm.
That actually showed me something about, it's kind of proposing an experiment, you know, like, can you experience every moment as holy?
Well, it's also reaching out and becoming interactive with the audience. So it's kind of, you know, eliminating the fourth wall. You know, while watching a film, you can have this moment because you're watching something that is reality itself, or God itself, as he puts it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So so the film itself is like I don't know, slapping the viewer on the cheek.
Yeah.
Wake up! Have that moment with me now. Wake up!
Yeah. And he doesn't explicitly relate it to literature, but that's what I thought about. Of course, you know, people often say that if you read a book and, you know, you read, I don't know, Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or, you know, another book, and then you see the film, then often it's kind of a downer because when you read the book, you imagine a lot. But when you make a film, you have to hire an actor, and this actor, you know, his nose is a certain way and his eyes are a certain way. So you have to give it a very, very explicit form.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, what Stalker is doing, but also Waking Life and some of a recent one, WandaVision, it's from Marvel. It's like a superhero series, but it's also doing that. It's playing with the environment is changing and the form is constantly changing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, this was must have been like 17 or 18 years ago. We were walking in a park in Utrecht, and we both had this, as I remember it, this experience that we were walking in a film, not as a metaphor, but we just had this physical experience of walking in a film. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember those geese or ducks or what were they?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we also had it because we were both kind of engulfed in thinking about these things. You know, we were young and very much interested in the sense perceiving reality. So having someone, having people around you that are interested in something similar is amazing, because then you can actually explore it further. And seeing films with people like that is even better. But I think also the crucial part is to talk about it afterwards, about the film. And that is happening less and less. And I'm not talking online. I'm not talking about reviews. I'm talking about people having seen something together and then just casually talk about, what just happened.
But that's the point, right? Where now we live in a kind of a review culture. So the films are already made with you reviewing that film in mind. So if that's why we have so many happy endings, because films with happy endings have people give higher ratings in the focus groups afterwards than films that don't have that. And one of my friends is, at one point I still kept seeing films with him, but not all films, because those people, when you watch a film and they know it's about to end, and that's already when they stand up, or that's one thing. But what he would do is he would instantly start to comment on the film, judge it and rate it. And one of the things I love is in the cinema, just sitting through the credits, and just like letting the film be without judging it,
wash over you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not just about film, but I wonder what it's doing, that we're in art in general, all the Voice and all these talent shows where you have someone doing something incredible on stage, and the very next thing that happens is a jury judging them.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, as an art, but this already started also, with painting, with music, live music, right? Kind of entering a certain mental state that you're open and receiving, but at the same time, you're not switching off. So what we were talking about earlier, you're focused, but you're relaxed. It's a time to relax. It's a time to receive. It's a very special, it's a very particular mental state. And I would say film, as a new art back then, kind of took it to another level, because it's determined, right, how long you are in that state. With a painting, or I don't know, you could just get up and leave at the museum. But here, okay, so you want to see the ending, so they anchor you. Why do you want to see the ending? But still, you're in that zone for a while. And then again, I think pretty early on they realized what happens to a mind in that state.
Yeah.
Oh, we can put any message in there, because it is a very interesting kind of receptive state that most of the time maybe we try to avoid, because it's also vulnerable.
Yeah. And by the way, so it's not just about film, but the one side is that rating it afterwards. In the meantime, you're kind of being either sold something, or you're open to something. But it already starts before, because you're going to a film and you expect something. So one of the things is that the film can be sometimes disappointing, but it's only disappointing if you expected something, right? And if I want to watch a film, I don't want to know anything more about it. And sometimes I remember, I think it was that film you just mentioned. I haven't watched it yet, but you said, okay, don't read anything about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, The Violent Heart. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we cannot speak about it, because then you would, reveal some spoilers. We can only speak about films like, Star Wars and the fact that Darth Vader is his father or something like that, which if you're Dutch, you already know because father is father. You go into the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Tarantino's film is another one that, again, it's an example of him playing with the audience, because what I love so much about this film, every time watching it, it gets more intense, is that you realize how much he's playing a joke on you. Brad Pitt is going to this ranch or this old movie plot, and it's like a Western. Everything screams Western. There's going to be a showdown. And every time you expect something and it doesn't happen, but that's intentional and he's playing with it. But then some of the people I watched it with, they were disappointed in it because of that, because they said, well, nothing happens in that film.
Yeah.
But how does nothing happen?
By that, what you just described, by knowing the buttons, because those buttons have been pushed over and over again.
Yeah.
And of course, these people, I mean, we're talking about multi-million projects. They definitely know their doelgroep.
yeah. Their target audience.
Target.
Yeah.
Even the word target audience.
Yeah.
Why are people being targeted?
Yeah.
But don't forget, there's also all this indie DIY production happening always. And again, it's like, I would say a lot of it is based on cultural identity. Yeah. And again, I'd say, of course, there's so many stories that need to be told. It's very important to open up that Pandora's box,
Yeah, which I think is happening even in, if just take Frozen by Disney. One of those Hollywood rules is that in the first 5 minutes, the main character has to meet the person they will end up marrying, right? And there it happens, usually it's like you even have like all those tropes like meet cute, and there are 4 types of ways in which they can meet, and it's all been reduced to just a couple of versions. And then in Frozen they meet, again, spoiler alert, the first man he turns out to be bad, and it turns out to be not about the princess meeting a man, but sisters together and everything.
Yeah, and don't forget the songs that then children keep on singing.
Let It Go. My daughter is singing Let It Go, Let It Go. And I think, what a great lesson.
Mine also sang for a long time, but in Spanish.
Yeah, mine in Dutch. So that's something else shared. And it's like, and then Soul is another recent Disney movie. And someone told me this because I'm not American. I don't have the experience. But they say, well, one of the comments this film got is that obviously it's about soul, but in kind of the wide way of seeing it, you have a soul. So I, Mario, have a soul, and you, Masha, have a soul. But in what she called the Black experience, it's not like a soul, but soul. And something can have soul, or music can have soul, or you can have soul.
Yeah, I remember that film. It's also connected to music. Yeah.
And then one of the themes that I've personally been fascinated with is with robots and technology, and also simulation. So just some of the films are like, obviously The Matrix, Blade Runner, Interstellar, iRobot. But so we were speaking about stories, right? And then there's just like there are 4 different kinds of meet cutes, or I think it's even 3. I think there's like 2 or 3 stories about technology. One is Pinocchio. So there's a robot and becomes a boy. So in iRobot, there's a robot, but the robot becomes human in quotation marks.
Oh yeah, I remember that one was Will Smith.
Yeah. And the other one is Frankenstein. So man creates monster kills man. And then I don't know if it's a different one, but films like, obviously also The Matrix, but also Blade Runner is who is the real robot?
Mm-hmm.
And are some people more technological than anyway? So there are these films about technology, and they're just like 2 or 3 stories that are being told over and over again in different forms, or about love. And
Well, it's interesting you compare it to Pinocchio, because I'm also thinking, well, when did these directions, when did they start happening? When did we start thinking in those terms?
mm-hmm.
You know, and of course, Pinocchio was not, I don't think they were thinking of cyborgs when they wrote it.
No, well, maybe I think I can't remember what there are early stories about making a clay. I think even in the Bible, I'm not sure about.
Gollum or something.
Yeah, Gollum, like making a clay figure which comes alive, and then now kind of that's the interesting thing. It's like the screen or the projection is now robots and technology and computers. Mm-hmm. And now we would say, just even when we speak about technology, you're probably not thinking about books or clothes. But we usually mean the most recent version of technology. That's very visible in iRobot as well, because it seems to be about technology, but it's actually about good technology and bad technology. Good technology is like his vintage sneakers, which is like a product placement.
Or a pencil.
Or a pencil, or like his clock radio, which plays a Stevie Wonder song.
Yeah.
Or his motorbike, which is like dirty, and the bad kind of technology is like shiny and perfect. So I do wonder, so since we're talking about the cave, and if we're living in the cave, to what extent do we have of anything happening in our lives, like falling in love or something like that? Do we have 2 versions or 3 versions or 4 versions? And to which extent is that limited by the movies we see?
Well, in any case, they're familiarizing us with that relationship and with the kind of thoughts, we should be having about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But of course, if a pen or sneakers or whatever is also technology, I don't remember anyone ever teaching me how to relate to them. So this is definitely on another level.
Just the fact that sneakers can be a thing that you want to wear. It's not just something you have to put on before you go out of the door, but you have to have these sneakers and not other ones. And they're part of your identity. I guess that's the thing, huh? Is everything that an actor in a film wears is part of nothing is accidental.
Yeah.
If their nose is too small, they make it a little bit bigger.
Mario, you're scaring me.
Or the other way around.
But so what are you trying to tell me? That our relationships have been determined by this avalanche of images?
There's a quote by Susan Sontag, but it's on photography. It could just as well be in film. It's from 1977. And I'll read the quote. Ultimately, having an experience becomes identical with taking a photograph of it. And participating in a public event becomes more and more to be equivalent to looking at it in photographed form. Mallarmé said that everything in the world exists in order to end in a book. Today, everything exists to end in a photograph. Mm-hmm. And I mean, when I read this, I just get the image of people at the concert watching the screen of their smartphone, filming what is happening on stage.
Yeah, yeah. Or even not even just the act itself, but the experience of it is already an experience of representation. That's even creepier, So it's like you're experiencing already the video while taping it. You're seeing something, you're like, oh, this is the video I'm going to watch. Or I'm going to post.
Post, exactly. Share
Yeah.
You have this saying, right? Show me the photos or it didn't happen.
Mm.
Yeah.
But so what? So because there's all this emphasis within contemporary technology on producing these images en masse, are we kind of trapped in these representations? Is that how our mind is that the path our collective mind is taking? Can we ever, or do we even want to get out of it? Because it's like it's a fabric of consciousness. So it looks like our consciousness decided to take that path.
Yeah. Well, I think so. There's something I think Adorno wrote about images. Like he talks about, for instance, Paris. The name Paris. You hear it and you think, wow, it's the city of love. So I want to go there because it's romantic. But you have never been there. But you know already it's going to be romantic. And then you come there and then you see Paris, but it's, the streets are dirty and you miss the metro and it's not romantic, and the hotel is crappy and it's not romantic at all. But then you just, instead of saying, well, I guess my image is shattered of Paris, you say, well, I guess I'm too close. Like you're too close to the screen. You can see the movie anymore. And then you go back and you tell your friends, everything you do, you go out you find a romantic restaurant that's typically Parisian. And then you go back and you think about what am I going to tell my friends and my family? Because for sure, because of the, I forget the name, the psychological mechanism that you cannot go there and invest all this time and just come back and say, well, it was actually really crappy. You have to have a story to tell your friends.
So you're stuck in a certain maze, and that reminds me of Dark City. Remember that film?
Can you tell me again for the listeners?
Well, I'm trying to so this man he wakes up, but he doesn't remember who he is, and he keeps running around the city. I think it's always dark, and he starts realizing that nobody really knows how to get out of it. And do you want me to spoil the thing?
No, go ahead.
What was it that the aliens are constantly? So the inhabitants are like these mice in a maze.
Yeah.
And they're being played by aliens. Right? Were they aliens? Or some kind of evil entity?
Yeah. Well, do you know about this? I think it's a few years old. It's called The Maze Runner.
Oh,
and it's a series of movies, and it's like this movies, I think it's for people in their 16, 17 years old, and the Hunger Games, and there's another one I can't think of now, but all these films are basically the same story. So in The Maze Runner, they just they're dropped into the maze, which is, it's kind of like very Heideggerian. You're just thrown into the world, and you have to make friends and all the typical like stories, teenage stories, high school stories, I would say. Friends, and there's an enemy and there's a love interest, but then they're in a maze and they have an assignment, but it's unclear who gave the assignment. And there's one person, the one, like in the Matrix, also the one. And from the start, he's already going to break out of the maze. So there's a maze, but the maze has certain limitations. So what the one is doing is is becoming a very good maze runner, getting the girl or the boy usually. If, by the way, if it's a man, he will get the girl, and if it's a girl, she will have to choose between a good boy and a bad boy. And it's more about that. So that's the story there. And I could be talking about any of these films.
Oh, absolutely. This is a very solid formula.
Yeah. So
that's been worn out.
So they finally they break out of the maze. And they come into, I think in this case, into a laboratory. And then they're told the truth about the maze and that it was actually kind of a simulation and to achieve something,
like a
whatever.
test.
But
Yeah.
then you go to the second movie. So the second part of the trilogy. And the second part of the trilogy, now this laboratory where they end up, that's their reality. But then it's exactly the same story because they find out, just like in Inception or like in the Matrix, that there's another layer and there's another layer.
Yeah. But so this is like the gamers perception, right, of the games, of the levels of the games. But then the reality, the veils of reality, that's a very old idea.
Mm-hmm.
You know, peeling off these veils.
Yeah. But it becomes a game, right? And it becomes, so the Matrix, I think the Matrix, the first film made a huge impact. And I really loved it. And then also, I also liked the other films, but then it became more kind of an excuse to have cool special effects and play a game.
Mm-hmm.
So there are, and yeah, I'm just thinking of the Truman Show as well, and that's another thing. Films start to speak to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And Blade Runner. So I think,
yeah. But if we start looking back, and what was the first film that used that kind of formula or that twist to the story? You know, or did it start in a short story or in some book?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what is the origin? I find that interesting, but I also find interesting too that the focusing can just be on an interesting dialogue, right? And that all that unveiling of realities can happen just in a dialogue in a film, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't need any of that stuff.
The dialogue. So that's why I love watching also these Hollywood films, maybe because of that, because it shows me something about what people are maybe fantasizing about in a way that maybe before we wouldn't have access to. And in this case, it could be, I'm thinking now, it could be, so we spoke before about, we had this experience that we felt like we're in a film. I actually had this experience a lot in my life and I really love it. And film is just a metaphor. It's not a film, but it's like a film. But there's also something I found out, it's called the protagonist syndrome or the main character syndrome, where you have the feeling you're in a film and your life revolves around you. Well, I think a lot, it's a societal syndrome, maybe. And it's also that we are catered to, right? It's like all the things we are sold is that we are unique and different and we are the one.
And with special powers.
With special powers, which I honestly believe is the case, but it's like you have like the real thing and the actual experience. So that was my point. I think I didn't finish it. That was my point about the Paris story, is that you go to Paris, but actually you haven't been to Paris because you're in the image. You're not really looking what's really there because your images and maybe your films you've seen, and how many, I mean, we can speak about porn and sex, right? How many relationships were screwed up because one of the two watched porn and this is the idea about what sex is supposed to be like. Or how I just saw this, it's called on Netflix, To All the Boys I Loved or something. The film starts about this girl with her boyfriend, starts speaking about how love is in films, and she starts to complain to him that they didn't have a meet cute, and she didn't like that because then they don't have a story. And what story? So I'm thinking about, okay, what kind of relationship is that where your relationship is a story?
Mm-hmm. Well, also the special powers thing, like if we are constantly bombarded with that idea, I don't know if people, can you become aware of your own real special powers?
Yeah, exactly.
And the relationship story is, it's a worn out. The romantic rom-com is just so worn out. I think they're really running out of ideas. It's on the verge of kind of it's a parody.
Yeah.
They're all parodies. They don't take themselves seriously anymore.
Yeah, which is becoming a thing, like self-conscious. Like I remember, Transformers Part 3 or 4 or 5, where in the beginning it's like, because by the way, I love watching bad movies, but
I get it.
Really bad ones. But I really enjoy that. But so the Transformers, I really love that. But at one point, so you can say, what I don't like is a movie that thinks it's good, but actually it's not, or it takes itself, takes itself seriously. But there are also like The Bone Collector, for instance. I think it's a very bad movie. But then Transformers, at one point, there's actually someone in a scene that just appears in a plane that was on the other part of the world, and like, how did I end up here? And another point, one of the actors says, "Screw story" or something like that. So that's kind of self-conscious film, right? But yeah, it's a long way from maybe Tarkovsky and Stoker.
Well, look, in any case, I think it's important to always remember that it's a collective enterprise. Making a film is a collective thing. So if there's like people involved, and then people involved receiving it and watching it, it's something about bringing people together, like the whole process. So I would just look like at the basic line, like what is going on here, and then start all these levels, like who manages the conceptual part, who manages the money part. I find all of this very interesting, because it's not like it's just some dreams popping up out of nowhere, It's an industry, and it's a very interesting industry. Is it industry of our fears, or the industry of our desires? But it is an industry, which, by the way, now has stopped because of the virus, or partially stopped, which is also quite interesting. Maybe it's the first time ever, right, on such a global level, that production is not just rolling as always. And what does that mean, and what will happen because of this gap? For me right now, like the important part is the human relation part. That film can facilitate and reminds us of, but can also do the opposite.
So if I understand you correctly, film can do, so it can take you into, for instance, a rom-com can take you into something where you think, oh, this is familiar, I know this story, but then take it to another direction, or maybe introduce something new, or make you feel something, right?
But we were talking about this earlier. Like, do we only stumble upon things? Do we consciously choose, like junk food film? Do we choose it for a certain reason? Like, I think when you say yourself that you're watching what you call bad films, but you're obviously doing some kind of research while watching them, and everybody has a different reason, right?
Yeah.
I would say, I don't know, I don't want to generalize, but okay. There's a big chunk of it is about escapism, for sure.
Yeah.
Right?
And I mean, then again, there are so many films that are about escape from New York, Alcatraz, The Maze Runner, so many films about or escaping, like what's it called, Slumdog Millionaires, escaping a social role, escaping something else. So is that something? So what was the Soviet? What was so radical about the Soviet films that you watched in that time?
Well, they weren't radical. They were just very happy people that didn't question their realities. They didn't question how things were running. At the same time, people like my grandmothers, they called them the kind films, because afterwards, after the collapse of Soviet Union, all the films were about mobsters and criminals and shooting. So from my grandparents, Soviet films are kind. They're about kind people.
Yeah.
And everybody's kind, and nobody nobody's trying to damage anything, or they portrayed heroism, heroes of the war, or how people sacrifice themselves for their country. So
I remember you told me about this film of a man who he goes out partying and then he comes back drunk and he takes, I don't know, an airplane or a train, but accidentally he goes to a different city. But because all the cities look exactly the same, he just walks to what he thinks is his own apartment building, because it looks the same in all cities. And he comes to another. Is that one of those films, or?
Well, yeah, so that's a very typical Soviet satire. So it's not criticizing, but it's satirical.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny you bring it up, because actually that actor, the protagonist, he just recently died. And it's very sad, because I believe he's one of the best actors Russia ever had. And that film became a ritual for Russians to watch every New Year night with their families. They would put on a film. I think it's from somewhere in the 70s. But even now, people put it on during New Year.
Why?
Well, first of all, because what you just described happens on New Year's night.
Yeah.
And his friends put him drunk, put the wrong guy on the plane. He goes to his apartment that he thinks is his, but it's of this woman, and that's how they meet. So it's a very romantic story, but with a Soviet twist, of course.
Yeah. Speaking of planes, and I'm getting very associative here. So speaking of planes, and 2001, which is also a film by Stanley Kubrick, which brings us to A Clockwork Orange, a very violent film. And in the end, the protagonist is punished. He's reprogrammed with images. So he lies there and he's restrained, and he is in some device where his eyelids are kept open, and he's being shown like very violent images, right?
Yeah, it's a very striking shot that stays in people's minds forever.
Yeah, because you see he cannot close his eyes, and it's horror. But
did you watch this on the plane?
I didn't watch it on the plane, but the connection is 2001. So I was thinking of 9/11. 9/11, but some of the images we see on the news are so violent, but you cannot stop watching. And that's, personally, when I think of violence in films, I think Quentin Tarantino is not violent at all in that sense. But there are some other films that don't show like blood and everything, but they're violent in another way. So very associative. Here's what I was getting at. I'm trying to get to Zizek. And that's another, I think so. When you showed me this, I'm going to say Tarantino, but Tarkovsky film. Yeah. There was like one of the defining moments where I thought, whoa, life and film, how you can, a film is not an escape from life, but it's something that maybe can show you something about life if you are willing or courageous enough to go into it. And the other moment was also with you when we were walking in the park and thinking like, wow, what if life is like a film, and how would that, First of all, would you notice anything? Because in the Truman Show, if you're in the Truman Show, you wouldn't even notice it. But then the third moment is when I read, this was, I think, not even a year after 9/11. that was quite a tense time, right? Now we're used to Trump and everything, but just think back about 9/11 and how people were speaking about it. It's an essay which actually it refers to both The Matrix, the film, and to Baudrillard. It's called Welcome to the Desert of the Real, which is what Morpheus says when in the beginning of The Matrix, when Neo and him meet. And the illusion is shattered, and he says, well, this is actually the real, and it's a desert. It's not a very nice place. So one of the prevailing discourse at the time was, it was a shock. Who could have seen this coming? Well, afterwards, of course, a lot of people saw it coming. But that's another story, maybe for another episode. But Zizek writes, just recall the series of movies from Escape from New York to Independence Day. Therein resides the rationale of the often mentioned association of the attacks with the Hollywood disaster movies. The unthinkable which happened was the object of fantasy, so that in a way, America got what it always fantasized about. And this was the greatest surprise. One should therefore turn around the standard reading according to which the World Trade Center explosions were the intrusion of the real which shattered our illusory sphere. Quite the contrary. It is prior to the World Trade Center collapse that we lived in our reality, perceiving the third world horrors as something which is not effectively part of our social reality, as something which exists for us as a spectral apparition on the TV screen. And what happened on September 11 is that this screen, phantasmic apparition, entered our reality. So it is not that reality entered our image, the image entered and shattered our reality. The fact that after September 11th, the opening of so many of the blockbuster movies with scenes which bear a resemblance to the World Trade Center collapse, like large buildings on fire or under attack or terrorist actions, were postponed, is thus to be read as the repression of the phantasmatic background responsible for the impact of the World Trade Center collapse. Of course, the point is not to play a pseudo-postmodern game of reducing the World Trade Center collapse to just another media spectacle. The question we should have asked ourselves when we stared at the TV screens on September 11th is simply, where did we already see the same thing over and over again? End quote.
So that image made us question reality prior to it?
Yeah, so he's saying we fantasized about this already.
Yeah.
If you look, I think there are people who have analyzed Birds by Hitchcock and the image of the World Trade Center attack with, or the image of King Kong on a building, or the image of Independence Day, where, people were selling movies by showing how American buildings got destroyed. But he's not saying that. He's not saying America got what it deserved or something like that. He's saying what happened is what we always fantasized about.
Yeah, but again, those fantasies were produced by a multi-million industry. It's not like people are sitting at home fantasizing that shit out of nowhere.
Yeah.
This is a big project. These images don't just pop up out of nowhere. And that's that's something we need to consider. That it's a kind of game of cat and mouse, and I don't know, it's strange. On the other hand, it has become kind of democratized with people posting so many of their own videos, and suddenly we are also seeing, well, genuine, I don't know, but like at least like it's definitely that person's whatever fantasy representation that they keep on feeding into the web. And what is better, I don't know. In both cases, I would say it's a bit of it's quite overwhelming, and it's a bit of a mess because all of those images are getting mixed up, interweaving. They're not representing, they're creating a reality in which we cannot close our eyes, like in that Clockwork Orange. But at the same time, we can't really, we can try to learn to navigate, but can we really make sense of it? Yeah. I'm not sure. And like also now, for example, maybe we have more time, but we have more time to get even more, consumed by all of these images.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. He speaks about the, hungry children in Africa images, right? But the fact that they are on a screen and we recognize them as a screen also makes them far away from us. So maybe that's a way of, because it's very interesting he writes this. So this always happens, when in America, when there's another school shooting or something like that, or then some certain movies are suddenly withdrawn because they're very similar to it. But but only for half a year or a year. So a few years after 9/11, all those movies that were postponed, they came out and they were very popular. And they were there's the Marvel movies. I don't know which one, but they're aliens attacking New York. So they're also kind of, so there were films made about an alien force attacking the center of power. Then it really happened. And then right away, again, these films were made maybe as a way of processing it or shaping the story.
Look, again, this is just a part of the world and one of the industries. There's also the Asian, very big film industry. Yeah. And there's also stuff happening in Asia. So it also just depends on the perspective. What are we focusing on? Which part of the world? What kind of culture? Whose fantasies? Whose dreams? Mm-hmm. And I think that's shifting rapidly. I think the Asian market is very big, and slowly this will affect. Gradually, it will fracture this kind of this bubble of Western self-obsession.
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite movies to watch at the moment?
At the moment, well, like I said earlier, The Violent Heart. At the moment, I don't really know. I mean, I'm not really looking. Like, if I find something that speaks to me.
Yeah.
I always recommend Orlando, which is my favorite adaptation of Virginia Woolf by Sally Potter. I think that's one of the films everyone should see about a person in transition. Virginia Woolf wrote the book, then Sally Potter made the adaptation. And just recently, a friend of mine made kind of photography, was Rizzo printing based on that topic as well. So it shifted to another medium. So I'm really interested in those kind of projects and seeing how what I also noticed was poetry when I write it. It's like this creature that kind of comes in and out through mediums. In one moment it can be a poem, the other moment it can be a stroke of paint or something.
Yeah.
I find that interesting, like that creature that moves and animates things rather than just one medium.
Yeah, because it's kind of something wants to reveal itself. I think most directors, at least I know Woody Allen spoke about this, that when you make a film, it's maybe very different from writing or something, in that you have very little control over how the final product will look.
Yeah, that something needs to reveal itself, and it will reveal itself using certain situations and what's at hand, And of course, there's so many minds working on something specific together.
Yeah.
But maybe they're also being used by that concept, that creature that just like wants to leave a mark.
Yeah.
Going back to the cave of Herzog, what fascinates me is that these prehistoric people created something that we now watch on film. I don't know if anyone can even enter those caves anymore because it's quite fragile.
Yeah.
But is it like the film will last for a while? The caves will outlast the film, I'm sure. I mean, it's quite possible.
Uh-huh.
You know, isn't that weird?
It's very weird. Yeah.
Like we're here, you know, creating these huge industries, technologies, but it would be insane if in another 35,000 years somebody finds those caves and they're not going to find any of this film. Film doesn't last that long or whatever. Now it's all digital as well. Like where are they going to look for it? In some cloud?
Yeah.
You know?
That's maybe the most fundamental question I can ask you. What is film at its most basic level? It's not like it's not the like actual film as in photographs or negatives being spat in front of a light, like in Plato's cave. It's not just the digital part of it. It's not the material.
Well, look, there's so many. Look, today I would say it's a need to relate through time, or it's a need to share through time. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Within a time, but also through time. But maybe if you ask me in a few weeks, I'll have a different answer. You know? The thing is that need impresses itself sometimes much more. It's more durable than other times.
Yeah.
And I would say those cave people did a really good job in impressing that need and impressing it, pushing it into, you know, the matter of reality.
Yeah, and it's incredible that it makes something accessible. Like you said, in, you know, a few decades ago, those caves would be closed and preserved. And at most, maybe you would see some photographs of it. But now you have maybe one of the best documentary makers in the world making a film, and with the, you know, how he does it with the music he plays with it and everything. He really makes you experience at least his version of those cave paintings. And it creates a bridge with us, you know, tens of thousands of years ago.
Exactly, because he's also very good in expressing that need to relate in time or through time or within a time. But again, he's doing that for us now. But that cave, I mean, in 20,000 years, maybe somebody else will do it again.
Yeah.
But I mean, the cave will stay, hopefully. You know, I mean, again, it was created because nature helped, and the entrances were blocked because of some shifts in the plates. But so, you know, it would be great if, again, somehow we helped it now ourselves. We helped and keep it, preserve it. I mean, this is an amazing story of human culture.
Sculpting in Time, right? It's Tarkovsky's book.
Yeah, and then every few thousand years we keep on relating to it.
Masha, thank you very much for speaking with me about film and Plato's cave.
Well, thank you, and it's really great to remember all these things that we realized back then, all those years ago.
Thank you for listening. Masha is always doing lots of projects, and you can find some of her poetry, her readings, her music, and her radio shows on her SoundCloud, and through the other links I will put in the description. Visit livefromplatoscave.com for ways to support the show and how to contact me if you have any questions. I also made a list of all the films we mentioned. Your homework is to watch them between now and the next episode. I'm just kidding, of course. One more thing. So far we have looked at Plato's cave through different lenses, like the lens of film today. But what if we looked at the cave as, well, a cave? Next month we will have a guided tour of Plato's cave by a geologist. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you again next month.